Well, let's begin what's trending. Presidential candidates of the All Progressives Congress, Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his People's Democratic Party counterpart, Atiku Abubakar, were absent on Wednesday as the Labour Party's presidential candidate Peter Obi and Rabiu Kwankonso of the New Nigeria People's Party joined others to sign an agreement on inclusive governance. Organizers of the event, Women in Politics Forum, Youth Hub Africa, and Inclusive Friends Association said the agreement was a consolidated agenda to be used as an advocacy tool in the 2023 general election and beyond. Labour Party candidate Peter Obi, who spoke at the event, decried poor representation of women and youth in the administration of the country, stating that Nigeria cannot progress when the most productive demography are left out of government, promising that his administration, if elected in 2023, will commit to the affirmative action on women and youth.
I'm committed to women education. I'm committed to ensuring that women are inclusive beyond the percentage, Rosia. Our government will be dominated by women and youth, and I'm committed to ensuring that those with disabilities, I've always preached, don't look down on anybody unless you're trying to lift the person up. And I'll lift them up.
Well, Dr. Bati, this event was for the top 4 presidential candidates to attend, and it's appalling that, it was just the 2 of them on this very important topic. We are seeing these presidential candidates just disregarding Nigeria as a whole in this type of way.
Well, I'm sure the candidates who were not there, they would have to, explain why they were not there. However, this was the second event taking place within the space of about 2 months. There was one before now, led by Dr. Afolabi Akiyode, and at that event, they came up with a document called Manifesto, at which they asked the various political parties to submit, to accept, to commit to ensuring inclusiveness. And now you have this second effort by another group, also talking about, that's Buki Shonibaredia, talking about inclusive governance. Now, the idea of inclusive governance is very important to the extent that Nigeria, for example, is a signatory to the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, 1990. Nigeria is also a signatory to other things that talk about inclusiveness. And if you look at the Nigerian Constitution, 1999, Section 42 thereof, it talks about equality and non-discrimination, either on the basis of gender or on the basis of circumstances of birth or religion. In 2006, Nigeria, in fact, came up with a national gender policy. So every election cycle, we talk about inclusive government, inclusive in this case, involving persons living with disabilities, involving youth, involving women, and you have groups like this, always reminding us of affirmative action, 35% affirmative action. And Nigeria is far behind. Senegal has about 57%. Rwanda has close to 50%. But Nigeria is just around 5%, which is a scandal. So that's why this kind of conversation is important. And in the various agenda that, these groups in civil society bring up, they're asking for, representation of women in decision-making positions, in cabinet positions, political parties involving women, and not restricting them to the distribution of refreshment at political events or the women wing, where they dance to welcome male members. The inclusion of youth, and also the inclusion of persons living with disabilities. And of course, one of the achievements of this administration is that this president, passed that prohibition against discrimination of persons with disabilities law. So the people pushing for affirmative action, they have a strong case. But the issue is, will Nigeria do it? In 2016, we came up with a revised national gender policy, 2016 to 2026. Somebody had to go to court to force the Nigerian government to implement that policy. Judgment was given in April. Yes, in April. That particular gender policy should be implemented. Who is implementing it? So that's why it's important that we ought to continue to remind the politicians and the political parties about inclusion and about the fact that this is even a matter of law and human rights as properly spelled out in the various protocols, the Constitution, the African Charter on Peoples and Human Rights, and also various international conventions to which Nigeria is signatory.
Yes, Ayo, Rabiu Kwankonso, during the event, also talked about the effect of inclusive government. He talked about how Nigerians are making waves in several countries across the globe and how inclusive government is the surest way for rapid growth.
Absolutely. Research has shown that when you have a more inclusive government, you have a more empowered government. You have a government that's more effective. Unfortunately, as Dr. Abati has reeled out the legislature, the advocacy plans, the policies and all that have been signed, especially when we talk about inclusivity, it's important to note that it's not just for women, it's also for persons living with disability. In a country like Nigeria, it's also speaking to the young people. The question I was going to ask the presidential candidate of the PDP, Waziri Atiku Abubakar, is he's committed in his campaigns. He's talked a lot about inclusivity, especially with regards to young people and women. He's even said he would invest $10 million in providing jobs for this sector. And I would like to understand why he wasn't there, he wasn't present to sign it. And then I'd also like to pose a question to the presidential candidates, and I think beyond presidential candidates, as we've seen, even the gubernatorial candidates, because when it comes to representation, it's not just an appointment at federal level, it's an appointment across levels, from state level, local government level, because these are the decision makers. We need to have a more representative government, and I think that's, these are key questions to ask. The only thing I was going to ask for the presidential candidates are, what are their plans and policies towards persons living with disabilities? These are a group of people in Nigeria who have been neglected for too long, and it's time we started to speak about it.
Well said, Ayo. Rufai.
Well, I'm not surprised that people wouldn't sign that document. You know why? You should ask them, have they been able to sign the peace accord in the first place?
That's another question.
Truth has to be said. See, culture will eat strategy for breakfast, and we deceive ourselves too much. We pay lip service to laws that affect people in our society, that talks to things about inclusiveness. We put all the laws in place, but we cannot implement it because we don't have a culture that cares for the downtrodden in society. We don't have a culture that cares for women and children, no matter the laws we've been able to put in place. And that's why you see a woman is disadvantaged in society. People living with disability are disadvantaged in society, and society moves on as though nothing is happening. It is a society that destroys its own weak. You are put on the ground in this country because you are weak. Dr. Abadi talked about President signing that Disability Act. I'm sure he remembers what happened in the National Assembly afterwards. How people living with disability had to go protest in the National Assembly and they were beaten blue-black.
I remember that story.
You remember Paralympians? That they were protesting in Lagos?
Yes.
That they were tear-gassed and beaten. These are people that went out there and won medals for this country, where able-bodied people disappointed this country. So that's the way we are wired. And I'm not surprised some presidential candidate don't sign it. It's all lip service. It's all election talk. But the question is, how can we go from this step to truly signing things like this? And not just signing it because I want to sign it, implementing it because it affects all of us. We forget one way or the other. No matter who you are, you face some certain level of disability in your life. If you pray to grow old, you will face some certain level of disability in your life. Nobody asked for it, but it happens. How can we adapt this into our society? Where are the strong laws, for instance, for ramps into offices, for ramps into public buildings and banks and the likes? Where are those laws? I have sat on many panels and commissions as regards this to advocate for people living with disability, which even extends beyond even disability that might have happened, but even congenital disability in the first place. Children living with autism and some spectrum, challenges. What are the laws there? Do our hospitals even have counseling centers for parents that have children living with disability and autism and things like that? So it's society that downplays its poor. Nigerian society is so wired that it is only the rich it favors. If you are poor, if you're disadvantaged, go away. And that's why we must start to change culture to be able to ensure that the poor people are amplified. Ayo, you know the privileges disabled people get in the UK. There's even a funny joke people make in the UK, and you know that joke, that sometimes people wish that they were even disabled. Because you get parking space preferences. You get all sorts of preferences, even more than able-bodied people. Except we start to do that here, we're not ready. So I'm not surprised.
Well said, Rufai. Well, as Peter Obi and Rabiu Kwankonso joined others to sign an agreement